Something is happening in Ohio. If you remember, not too long ago, we went over an article that said you have a higher chance of being abducted in the state of Ohio, by aliens, that is. And now, today, we have this. Ohio fishermen's strange encounter. Were two Ohio fishermen abducted by aliens? The still unexplained encounter happened at Salt Fork State Park in Guernsey County, Ohio. My Ohio friends, let me know if I pronounced that properly. The men have not spoken publicly about the incident and want to remain anonymous, but for the first time, an investigator is sharing evidence with Fox 8 News. They were scared, said Thomas Wertman, director of MUFON of Ohio. Something traumatic happened to them. Wertman was contacted by the men soon after the incident on August 29th, 2014. He said whatever they saw affected them so much they didn't want to go out of the house at night, afraid something was going to happen to them again. Both men were deemed credible and by all accounts living very normal lives with work and family. Wertman says they had no previous thoughts or interests in UFOs or aliens and were not using drugs or alcohol. The men frequently enjoyed night fishing at the park and kept a very regimented schedule between baiting their hooks and tending to a campfire every half hour. That night was just like previous outings and seemed typical to the men until 10:30 p.m. They saw something weird in the sky like a moon, but smaller. 11:30 comes along and another light, but this one is overhead, said Tom. The light flew away and the men continued fishing until between 1:30 to 1:45 a.m. when they heard a shrill woman's cry coming from across the lake. One's baiting his hook, the other is sitting in the lawn chair, and all of a sudden, the man in the lawn chair says something doesn't look right. So he gets his cell phone out, and it's 5:19 in the morning, according to Wertman. He remembers absolutely nothing. Over 3.5 hours were gone in an instant. You remember the episode we did, must have been months ago now, 3 to 4 months ago, where we had multiple callers at the same time, calling in one after another, just by chance, that all experienced missing time. Very interesting stories. Neither man had any recollection of where the time went. The other man was still baiting his hook 3.5 hours later, and he's still standing there. Wertman began an extensive investigation. He found no air traffic in the region or close to the men. Soil analysis returned with a higher iron content. As you got away from the area, it dissipated, Wertman said. The men's clothing was even more peculiar. Tom sent it to a laboratory for testing. Both sets of clothing had unexplained chemicals all over them. It didn't add up, said Wertman. One jacket had a pink coloration. The results were eerily similar to a famous alleged UFO alien abduction from New Hampshire in September 1961. You guys probably know this one. It's Betty and Barney Hill were a married American couple, but it's worth reviewing because it's a good one. It was around 10:30 p.m. and they were returning to Portsmouth from a vacation in Niagara Falls when they observed strange bright lights. The couple drew pictures of what they believed was the inside of the spacecraft. Betty's brand new blue dress also had chemicals on it and a pink discoloration just like the fisherman. It had similar chemicals in unusual places, and another one from Canada had the same thing, said Wertman. Again, remember, Wertman's working on behalf of MUFON. I went to one MUFON talk years ago, and it was at a UFO parade in good old Pine Bush, New York, when I was writing the story about the gentleman who believes he's been abducted since he was 9 years old. That started in Peekskill, New York, and continued happening when he moved to Pine Bush. He did not know when he moved to Pine Bush that it was a UFO abduction type capital. And a lot of people have a lot of sightings there. And once a year in the summer, I believe it is, they have a UFO parade, and it attracts a lot of interesting people. It was actually really awesome, and it did look a little bit like the people who are on top of the buildings in the movie Independence Day who want to be abducted. Did give off that kind of vibe, but they had MUFON talkers, and they shared a lot of interesting stuff, and it had people talking who said they'd been abducted, and they also have a museum right on Main Street there. I believe that's Main Street. And all about alien abduction in the area, dating back to like columns of fire that there's witnesses, I think it was in the 1800s. They saw columns of fire reaching down from the sky and going down into a cemetery. It's just outside of town. So that was my one MUFON experience. It was cool. A recent report from Canada Sports Betting. You guys remember this? We were just going over this. Examined abduction statistics across North America between 2019 and 2024 and found Ohioans have a 1 in 89 chance of reporting an alien abduction. Are you from Ohio? Do you have this experience? They said more than 4,000 abduction reports have been filed during that time. When asked why Ohio has such large numbers of alleged abductions, Wortman said he believes it's partly due to the number of people who believe in this subject or are open to the idea. Ohio is very alien curious. Additionally, Ohio is consistently in the top 10 for UFO sightings. Some UFO researchers have previously surmised that it's due to the large population without any large mountains to obscure the view, along with the nuclear power plants and military installations. You've got Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, where there's been rumors for years about aliens being recovered and taken to Wright-Patterson, said Wortman. In December 1994, law enforcement in multiple jurisdictions in Trumbull County reported seeing and chasing strange lights in the sky that still can't be explained. And Wortman says there are multiple similar cases from very credible witnesses in law enforcement and the military. But what about the fishermen? Fox 8 reporter Suzanne Stratford asked Wortman if the men believed they were abducted by aliens. He said the men will only say that they lost time, and they have not sought any publicity from the event. So what does Wortman think? Does he believe the men were abducted by aliens? It's hard to say yes, they were abducted by aliens, but all the indications are pointing towards something that is just beyond our realm of belief, said Wortman. Could it have been a UFO? Very likely, he said. It reminds me, so like thinking about these guys, and it just sounds like, from here, from where I'm standing, it sounds like they might be reluctant to share their story publicly because of maybe to them there's a taboo involved. Who knows if any of this is even real? Maybe it's a planted story because we're working on this narrative leading up to this quote unquote disclosure. So it's like we see a lot more of these stories, but we also might just be seeing more of these stories. So it's people have had genuine encounters with things they cannot explain. We've had really interesting phone calls about people who experienced time loss. It's freaky stuff. But it reminds me of when I was in Georgia talking to a lot of people in that town of Washington. And they were like, very Baptist town, very devout. And it was extremely taboo to talk about alien abductions or UFOs or anything beyond, what would be, acceptable in public discourse in a town like that. And I love that town. It was a great town. And I had a lot of really awesome conversations there with so many people about history, about the supernatural, So you guys, if you've been listening to this show for quite some time, you've either listened to those episodes or you've had the book, Ghost of the Civil War. I was like, what did we end up calling that one? Ghost of the Civil War. I went down there to just do one article about the Confederate gold going missing. And within 20 minutes, I was like, this is going to be a book. Within 20 minutes of me being in that town and seeing a lady walk into this old house and then come running out screaming that she was being chased by ghosts, I just was like, I think I have more here. Yes, her boyfriend did wind up saying he wanted to skin me and my friend alive because he didn't like that we were asking her and her friends questions about gold, because it turned out they were also looking for gold. It also turned out they were witches. Legit. It turned out, and like not all the witches were friends in this town, but it turned out that this town had despite being such a religious and small town, there were a lot of witches. There was a coven that was operating the hotel right there in the square of the town. This beautiful old hotel that I stayed in one night. I didn't know it was run by witches until my first morning there. So I checked in the night before. Walked downstairs to see the concierge in the morning to ask if they knew how I could find the passageway to the old graveyard that the hotel was built on top of. Because I'd read stories, I went to the town historian, was trying to find a grave of this woman who had her husband killed. That was an ugly murder. She ended up being I think the second lady ever executed by the state of Georgia. And they had buried her after they hung her and hanged her at the crossroads of town. And they do that because it was believed then that if you hang someone at the crossroads, it would confuse their ghost. But at the same time, they didn't really want to hang a woman. They thought that was weird, but she set up the murder of her husband. I'm going really off course. I swear I'm going to swerve back to aliens in a minute and taboo. I just felt like revisiting Georgia for a second. And so they hanged her. They confused her ghost. They hanged her because she convinced her brother and her lover to murder her husband, who seemed like a bad dude, but still, don't do that. The brother or the lover shot the husband in the jaw. It didn't kill him immediately. They buried him alive. He died in the grave. They hanged her. And there's even conspiracy theories dating back to this time. This is, I think, late 1700s or early 1800s. And there's people who believe that she escaped and lived another life somewhere else in Georgia. Or maybe another state, actually. People claiming they saw her. They don't know. But you can go back in the history books and the records of that town. And even back then, conspiracy theories have always been happening. And honestly, it's possible because there might have been some sort of affair happening with her and some law enforcement. I forget what it was. I forget who it was. But so there's that. And they buried her. And where they buried her, they eventually, this is the part of the town that burnt down multiple times. And then they wanted to build this beautiful hotel on the graveyard. So they had to move all the graves. So allegedly, they moved all the graves to this other beautiful cemetery a few minutes down the road in this town. And but there was a trap door somewhere in the hotel that I'd read about that would allow you access to the old graveyard beneath the hotel. No headstones. So I go downstairs my first morning there. I see the lady behind the desk. I'm like, hey, would you happen to know about the trap door that goes to the graveyard below this hotel? She's like, absolutely. Like real quick. And while she gets up from her seat behind the desk, I notice that she has a statue of Anubis. And on her computer screen is some sort of like funerary art. Like stuff you would see on old tombstones. So she gets up and she's like, I'm doing my studies. She just immediately goes in like what she's doing. She's studying to be like a funeral director. And as she is moving a carpet off the floor just to the right of the desk and a chair, she moves this like old Victorian chair, and I start to see the trap door where it's hidden in the floor. She's like, I'm a witch. Like, you don't say. And by this point, I'd already had some run-ins with other witches. You might have heard me talk about the witches who were doing blood rituals, black magic on a battlefield that happened, an early revolutionary battle that happened in the same town on Valentine's Day. Super bloody battle. I wouldn't say they weren't Americans yet, but the Patriots won that one. But these witches were doing weird crystal blood sacrifice stuff out there. But this is another witch, and they're all witches. And I found my way down into the graveyard. I think I walked on the dirt that used to be the graveyard. Then I found a door out of the bottom there, kind of crawled out, and then walked to the tree where I believe they hanged this lady. Anyway, the witches, there was obviously no taboo in talking about the supernatural with the witches. I did, however, say, because a lot of these witches, the nicer ones, I don't agree with it, but they were very nice. And they were like real, like they would say they were Appalachian witches, and they called themselves Christian witches. And they had some workaround logic in their head on how they could be Christian and witch. And I was like, well, and this is before I had been religious. But even then I was like, well, in the Bible, I'm pretty sure it says that's not cool. You can't do both. You got to pick. And they were like, well, no, we can do this and that. I'm like, all right, cool. But they were nice, and they had a lot of interesting stories. And that was that. Anyway, this town, besides the witches, the old folk in town, there's a lot of old folk in town. They were very reluctant to talk about UFOs. It didn't sound good to say it out loud. But if you talk to them enough and you showed that you were being kind and not trying to like mock or judge, you got a lot of weird stories. And all of a sudden, stories began to emerge about a UFO landing in the backyard of this lady's house. And I met this lady, and she must have been, I don't know, 80 or 90. She was older. Really just such a nice lady. We talked all about history and of the town and her family, and they could date the family back to before the revolution. And some of her family fought in that battle on Valentine's Day during the revolution. And also some of the family, I believe, were part Indian. Like Indian ran that area up until the colonialists came and tried building up this part of Georgia. And those are some crazy battles too. Like I wrote about that extensively in one chapter because those are brutal, brutal battles. I mean, just insane stuff. Kidnapping babies, kidnapping wives, slavery. And this is on both sides, So anyway, this story began to emerge of UFO landing in the backyard. It was hard to get any proof. But I will say that these people who were so reluctant to talk about this openly, the more I talk about it with them, the more they'd be like, okay, you should talk to this person. And I was talking to sheriffs. I was talking to people who are high up in their churches. People just respectable. A lot of these people I found very respectable, very nice, very Christian, genuine people. And they're all like, yeah, we saw like Polaroids of the UFO, multiple people saying this. So it just reminds me, like when I'm thinking of these people, these fishermen, they don't want to go on record. They don't want to be public. They want to remain anonymous. I'm just projecting onto them what I'm just telling you about. This is where I'm basing it from, this taboo that might be on certain people still. Online, it's a lot less taboo to talk about aliens and all this weird supernatural stuff, whether you believe in them or not, or have a different angle or interpretation of aliens. Something's happening, clearly. But if you're not as online as some of us might be, you might not. You might still feel that taboo. But like this person from MUFON talking to them, he seems to believe their story. He doesn't know what happened. He seems to lean in the direction of alien abduction. Who knows? But it was Georgia, in this town, on my first night just a few hours after seeing this lady run out of the house and screaming that the ghost was like attached to her, she turned out to be a psychotic person. But it was that night that I saw what I can only describe as a UFO, and it seemed very similar to the story I would eventually read about Jimmy Carter in Georgia seeing some sort of orb going this up and down and left and right above the tree line in Georgia. We just went over that story recently. I think it was like a week ago. I didn't know his story yet, but when I read his story, Carter's story, that is, I was like, that is so similar to what I saw. And for those who haven't heard that story, real quickly, what I saw was in the backyard of a beautiful farm above the tree line, just after sunset. It was dark, an orb, very bright light, moving up and down and left and right. And it sustained that motion we must have looked at it for 20, 30 minutes. I looked at it through a scope on an AR. I tried taking pictures through the scope with my phone. Obviously, you know how that goes. It didn't work out too well. But I'm watching planes go. I can see other things that appear normal to me. But that thing was super weird. And then it just disappeared. And then it did, whether it was the same thing or something else, it appeared to the left. I believe that was west. I forget exactly how I'm orienting this situation. I was a little lost in those woods, but it appeared again or something like it. Did the same exact thing, and then it disappeared. And then so I'm doing the Confederate gold story. I'm chasing down that thread. I'm doing this okay, what's going on with witches now? How did that happen? And then the history of the town throughout it, because there's supernatural aspects of the town throughout. And you guys, if you're new to this channel, there's a whole, we did maybe 10 episodes of me narrating all of this. So you can just go back to the channel and see all of this laid out. But this story of these fishermen just reminded me of all this, and small towns and people not sure what they experienced. And it's every small town. This part of Georgia, they refer to as one of the darkest parts in the southeast because there's just not a lot of light pollution. So there happens to be an astronomy village where people go and they observe the sky here right outside of that town in Georgia. And I forget what it was called. It had some weird name. But I started asking around those people and the DEA and this weatherman, this guy who's a historian, but he's also a meteorologist, and he doesn't like alien talk, doesn't like supernatural talk. But I asked all these people, they've all seen the thing I just described to you, the orb going up and down, left and right. And they're like, we don't know what it was. The DEA is wasn't us, wasn't a helicopter. And the guy, this meteorologist / historian who was amazing. Great. One of the greatest sources I think I've ever had. Such a great storyteller, just typical Southern gentleman who knows his history very well. And we had a good time going back and forth, because obviously I'm smiling because I'm just remembering me being a Yankee, this carpetbagger, heading down to Georgia. And they ask where I'm from, and I have to say, well, I grew up outside of West Point. And then immediately they're like, West Point, you say? And for those who don't know, West Point having given birth to many of the generals who ran the Union, and in particular, William Tecumseh Sherman, who did the March to the Sea that burnt down, a lot of Georgia. Also, Jefferson Davis, though, went to West Point. So it's not like, I told him, you had Jefferson as well, and Lee. So, we had a really good time sparring about history. But even that guy, as, serious as he was about the normal world, he's like, dude, he didn't say dude. He was like, that thing is super weird. I don't know what that is. No one knows what it is, but it just appears. And there wasn't an Air Force base nearby. But there was that taboo there. But if you show up, this is why doing reporting in person is so awesome. And there's so much we can do online and breaking down narratives, subverting narratives. I love it. Obviously, it's great. But there's something so special about just leaving your home, going to a completely strange place, and then getting, the opportunity to spend a lot of time there. If you just go there for a day, it's not going to work out. It's like even when I did the East Palestine story, I spent days there, and you kind of have to just show people like you are serious. I'm not just going to use you for a soundbite. I actually care about getting you help, amplifying this problem here, understanding this place to the best of my ability as much as you do, to the people who are from here, like the locals, how it is if from your town or your city, wherever you're at, when someone from out of town comes by and they might want to tour, you're driving around, they ask a question about it, and all this history, deep history about your area, hopefully, I love doing that. I love knowing that. And then I love trying to learn that about the places I visit. So then it becomes, because the location is as much a character, for lack of a better word, as the people themselves. The location is this vessel, this time capsule of so much history, so much story, so much mythology that you can learn from. And then you have to realize that the people who are from that area, really from there, not just transplants, but really, really from there, that is an extension of their consciousness. So when I'm talking to these people in Georgia, I am trying to be respectful to that and being they are a part of this very long history. Because in New York, we're mostly transplants or immigrants from, my family's Russia and Irish. And then most people in New York or New York City, they've moved there from around the country, around the world, whatever. There's not, even in upstate New York, there's not a lot of people who have been there for generations. Whereas in Georgia, in this town, these people, many of them, can trace their family line back to before the revolution, to when it was just Indians running that place, and then they have books and diaries and all this stuff to prove it. So you take that into account when writing about these places. You don't want to turn them into a mockery, into a caricature, and then they also look at you, and they have every right to, as a journalist, to be well, I don't trust this person. All journalists are liars, and they are. So you want to prove yourself, and also try not, see past all that stuff, the facade or whatever you think you are, whatever preconceptions you might have. So it's important when talking to anyone about anything, but especially when you're doing reporting, whether it's on the supernatural stuff or history, whatever, if you want it to resonate, and look, I'm not saying I've cracked the code, but I've done it long enough to know what resonates for me and what can resonate with the audience. And then for the people, of the towns, I'm not trying to write something that's going to just make everybody happy. I'm trying to create something that's going to give a lot of different angles to a certain story, so then you can walk away and feel like you have an understanding, but that you might need to do further research if you're interested in it. And that no one writer or whatever, YouTuber, podcast, or whatever you want to call these things these days, is the authority on the truth. But that was my tangent. Thank you for tuning into my TED Talk. What do we got next here? I wanted to just go over a little bit more of Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, which I had something pulled up. Top secret. This is from August 6, 2025. I know we've talked about Wright-Patterson before, but since we were in Ohio, let's talk about Ohio just a little more. I love Ohio. A lot of good music came from Ohio. I know we might have different tastes in music out there. Look, Marilyn Manson, Brian Warner's from Ohio. You may or may not like his music. I'm a fan. I think Trent Reznor is from Ohio as well. But from a Second Story Window is a band that I love, and they're from Ohio, and I listen to them on repeat when I was in Ohio catching those pedophiles. When I was driving from place to place, I just turned on from a Second Story Window, and I love doing that when I'm in a state. I'm this state gave birth to this band that I love, so I'm going to listen to it on repeat. And if you haven't listened, I've had Paul, the guitar player from a Second Story Window, on this show. It was awesome. We talked about aliens and sleep paralysis, and shooting vacuum setter robots. Great band if you're into erratic, crazy metal. Newly released top secret government records have revealed shocking swarms of UFOs at an Ohio military base with close ties to the mysterious Roswell compound, where the first downed spacecraft is infamously reported to have crashed. The government was forced to release documents and video of 2 separate assaults by unidentified aerial phenomena at the Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Greene County in December. So this is of 2025. According to the disturbing documents, the Air Force determined that the waves of unidentified objects were so serious it halted flight operations, alerted local law enforcement agencies, and utilized thermal imaging cameras to pinpoint the location and identity of the mysterious UFOs. Does that remind you of any recent stories in the news? You remember El Paso? They were going to shut down that airspace for 10 days. And then they just reopened it. And they were like, it was balloons, it was lasers, it was cartel, it was drones. We don't know. Let's wager a little bet. I'm not just kidding. I don't really bet. I don't bet. But how long until they say it was UFOs? How long? I'm just checking the sky to see if they're watching. I see one fake cloud. I see 2 fake clouds. The objects appeared to be lights moving as a group, but too high up to get an accurate assessment of what they looked like, one officer at Wright-Patterson reported to the Daily Mail. And they're showing in this image here in the globemagazine.com quite possibly one of the blurriest images of lights I've ever seen. It could be absolutely anything. It does have the shape of the extremely real looking lunar probe that landed on the moon. This doesn't look like anything, but it's there. Another officer spotted an unknown aircraft descending toward the base, getting within 500 feet of landing before it suddenly ascended and disappeared. One patrol confirmed the officer's sighting, adding that the unidentified flying object just vanished after approaching the base's runway. Secret government files reveal that debris from the infamous 1947 UFO crash at Roswell, New Mexico, was allegedly flown to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base to be studied by a secret government group dubbed the Majestic 12, comprising of top scientists, intelligence officers, and military brass. CIA files have detailed how the group conducted projects intended to communicate with aliens and reverse engineer downed alien spacecraft for military use. We know they've been trying that for quite some time. We know that they've been doing a lot of remote viewing tests. I mean, they said they stopped, but they said they stopped MK Ultra. Do you believe them? We know that we've read files. We don't know, but we've read files, declassified files that say that they've tried remote viewing Mars from like 5 million years ago, that they've remote viewed the Ark of the Covenant, which we all know is at Mar-a-Lago. I've seen the pictures. Clearly, that's what that is. But let's see. They had a hyperlink here to something else in this article, but hyperlink is dead. The base was also home to the Air Force's Project Blue Book, just talked about it yesterday, which conducted investigations into 12,618 UFO sightings, with 701 still declassified as unidentified, according to records found in the National Archives. As Globe readers know, military pilots have reported hundreds of close encounters with UFOs in recent years, but the powers that be at the Pentagon have refused to acknowledge their alien origins, even though the objects can perform airborne feats impossible for our most modern aircraft. And this is, look where we are today. We are having discussion, no taboo in the mainstream, in the public square, online, Trump, Obama going back and forth. We might have different opinions on what's going on. We talked about Alien Polina Luna yesterday. Disclosure. What's this all mean? Where is it heading? I know there's people who say, I might have too narrow of a outlook on all this by just condensing it all down to demons or that how could spacecraft be a demon? But like I was saying, I think the tech sector, the tech vampires, are either demonic or demons themselves, and that they are creating stuff that is demonic, and it's technology that they're like hell-based technology. But that's just me. And someone else was asking like how I believe in ancient civilizations, but believe that the Earth is 6,000 years old, give or take. And I think it's possible for within the 6,000 years for civilizations to have advanced and collapsed, and then disappear under cataclysms or different floods, not the flood. But I think it's more than possible. I mean, look what we've done in 100, 200 years. So, that's my answer to that. Insiders say these sightings have occurred with frightening regularity around conflict zones and military installations, almost as though the UFOs are scouting humans' combat ability and preparation for an invasion. That's one way of looking at it. Other people might say that the aliens, if you believe in aliens, like if they're grays or whatever, that they've come here to prevent us from killing each other, that they're actually turning off the nukes, or they're just studying us. These unidentified craft keep popping up over war zones around the earth, and that's a phenomenon that gives me pause, says one concerned military source. And there's a painting that goes back hundreds of years that people claim is like UFOs over a battlefield. Let me see if I can find it. You can hear me clicking loudly. You guys, I know my new mic, the volume was a little low yesterday. I'm going to try to boost it a little more today. Hopefully it sounds a bit better. It sounds better on this end, but I know the volume could be increased, so we're working on that. But we're trying to make it happen here. Oh my goodness, here we go. Battle over Nuremberg. You guys know this painting? Shout out to Nuremberg. Battle over Nuremberg, Germany, 1561. I think it's a really interesting painting. An April 1561 broadsheet by Hans Glaischer described a mass sighting of celestial phenomena or unidentified flying objects over Nuremberg, which was then a free imperial city of the Holy Roman Empire. People have speculated that these phenomena may have been extraterrestrial spacecraft. Skeptics assert that the phenomenon was likely to have been another atmospheric phenomenon, such as a sundog, although the print does not fit the usual classic description of that phenomenon. A sundog is an atmospheric science. In atmospheric science is an atmospheric optical phenomenon that consists of a bright spot that like flashes up. It's like a lens flare in a J.J. Abrams film. That's not what this painting looks like. This painting is, you see the village of Nuremberg. If you haven't, look it up because it's fascinating. And in the sky above it, very interesting shapes. There's a sun with a face, and then these like circles all over the place, these blue and red circles, and then these different lines. And 3 to 4 things, like 5 or 6 things that could be like crafts. But it's very interesting. So I bring it up just to say, like, people have been seeing things. If you want to go down the route of these being some sort of UFO, some sort of craft, whether it's alien or it's an ancient civilization with that was technologically advanced, which is where I'm coming from, and that did happen over the past 6,000 years, and that some of them during times of cataclysm know to break away. That's why we have the whole theory of breakaway civilizations. Then they hide out, they survive, they have the technology, they got to rebuild afterwards. I think Elon Musk is a descendant of that. But let's see here. I'm going to read a bit from the broadsheet here. In the morning of April 14th at daybreak between 4 and 5 a dreadful apparition occurred on the sun. And then this was seen in Nuremberg, in the city, before the gates, and in the country by many men and women. At first there appeared in the middle of the sun 2 blood-red semicircular arcs, just like the moon in its last quarter. And in the sun, above and below and on both sides, the color was blood. There stood a round ball of partly dull, partly black ferrous color. Likewise, there stood on both sides, and as a torus about the sun, such blood-red ones and other balls in large number, about 3 in a line and 4 in a square, also some alone. In between these globes, there were visible a few blood-red a few blood-red crosses, between which there were blood-red strips, becoming thicker to the rear and in the front malleable like the rods of reed grass, which were intermingled among them 2 big rods, one on the right and the other on the left. And within the small and big rods, there were 3, also 4, and more globes, so little circles inside these like tubes, or what they're calling rods. It's a really cool painting, and it's very interesting. So you can look at the painting, and then beneath the painting on this sheet, they've written out this entire description. Very, very, very interesting. All right, let's get back to this. Conspiracy theories are coming true, and we got to ask ourselves why. Why are they giving us these answers now? Because if you said what I'm about to say to you 4 or 5 years ago, you would have lost your entire internet presence. I mean, so many people. But here we are. And this is from yesterday in the Daily Mail. You won't be surprised about this story, but it's surprising to see it in the Daily Mail. Declassified CIA files reveal chilling blueprint to manipulate Americans' minds through covert drugging with vaccines. A newly released CIA document reveals a chilling blueprint to manipulate minds through covert drugging experiments. We know this. We got over this. The report, added to the CIA's reading room in 2025, details the government's once top secret project Artichoke that ran from 51 to 56, focusing on behavior control, interrogation techniques, and psychological manipulation. The 7-page document, titled Special Research for Artichoke, with an attachment labeled Suggested Fields for Special Research Relative to Artichoke, outlines proposals to develop chemicals capable of altering human behavior. It discusses drugs designed for immediate effects, like truth serums, and long-term influence, potentially administered through food, water, alcohol, or cigarettes. Researchers also suggested that such substances could be disguised in medical treatments such as vaccinations or injections. The CIA was also looking into methods beyond chemicals, listing hypnosis, sensory deprivation, gases, and other psychological methods for interrogation and behavioral control. Why do we have the CIA still? I get the need that we initially had for it. That is not what it seems to be doing. It seems to be completely weaponized against the people. Artichoke served, as you probably know, as a precursor to the CIA's MKUltra program, which later broadened mind-altering experiments on a larger scale. Many files were destroyed in the 70s. That's because of Richard Helms burning it all, leaving the full extent of the research and how far it progressed unknown. I'm just going to read some of the documents. This is one of the declassified documents here. It is believed that specific research should be undertaken to develop new chemicals or drugs or to improve known elements for use in the Artichoke work. A study should be made to determine what drugs are best suited for direct use on subjects along the lines of amytal, and pentothal. Can't even read that one. And which drugs are best for indirect or long-range approach to subjects, which should remind you of like the heart attack gun with the poison fish poison inside of the dart. And they found those vials later on during, I believe, the church committee, after Richard Helms tried to destroy all that stuff. This second type of drug should be one that could be administered over a considerable period of time, possibly being placed in food or water, and would rather have an agitating effect, producing anxiety, nervousness, tension, etc., or a depressing effect, creating a feeling of despondency, hopelessness, lethargy, etc. They love you. This study should include chemicals or drugs that can effectively be concealed in common items such as food, water, Coca-Cola, beer, liquor, cigarettes, ham, the turkey Thanksgiving meme. This type of drug should also be capable of use in standard medical treatments such as vaccinations and shots. I don't know why it seems a little redundant there, but maybe they're thinking about aerosolized vaccines that we don't really know about yet publicly. I mean, we've talked about it, but while there are literally hundreds of chemicals or drugs that affect the mental processes of an individual, many of these chemicals or drugs could be eliminated by individuals having special knowledge in the chemical drug field. It is known that the Army Chemical Warfare Service has made exhaustive studies along these lines, and perhaps they could furnish us with many specific answers. Redacted could undoubtedly give pertinent information if they could be properly approached. Maybe it's aliens that are redacted. Oh, man. The document was declassified in 1983. I mean, that's why we've known about this stuff, but was resurfaced on social media before users are shocked, where users are shocked to see the CIA discussing methods of drugging entire populations. We know this. This is why I say, one sec, I'm going to take a sip of my non-drugged water. Just checking to see if any CIA spooks are outside right now. There's like a tree. It might be a spook in a costume. This is why I say that David Lynch, I think, with Twin Peaks in particular, was making a broader statement, writing a metaphor for what America has done to the population. So, we talked about in episode 8 of The Return, which is technically season 3 of Twin Peaks, which is incredible. And episode 8 is my favorite episode, maybe of all of Twin Peaks. And it's up there with my favorite episodes of all time. He chose to zoom so slowly and so closely into the Trinity test, the bomb exploding, going right into it, and then showing you how it fit into the mythology of Twin Peaks, which is then this other realm, the spiritual realm, the lodge, the Black Lodge, and where these demons come from. So he chose to show us this, not really tell us, but he showed us that perhaps blowing up an atom bomb for the first time tore a hole between our dimension and that dimension. And through that, something like Bob came. We saw Bob descend in an orb, very similar looking orb to the orb that the witches have in Wizard of Oz, which is another reoccurring theme in David Lynch stuff. And The Wizard of Oz is an incredible movie. I love that movie. It's so crazy. But staying on Lynch, the other thing I think of as a metaphor in Twin Peaks that connects to this directly would be the way, and this is a spoiler alert for anyone who hasn't seen this yet. So if you don't want to know a huge answer to the mystery of Twin Peaks, just skip ahead a few minutes, and we should be done. The murderer of Laura Palmer ends up being, and I hope you've skipped ahead if you don't want this answer, her father, who then we find out is possessed by a demon named Bob. So we learn in season 3 that Bob seems to have transported into Earth when they ripped a hole in the dimensions with the Trinity test. Love that episode. Nine Inch Nails is in that episode as well. It's so good. It might not make a lot of sense if you haven't watched most of Twin Peaks, but you could just watch it as a standalone piece of art. But the father, we learn, has drugged the mother into a very lethargic complacency. And so he's able to get away with a lot of this stuff, and while acting very strangely, like a possessed person. Weird dancing, you know, when we find out he's the killer, it gets very, very, very dark. But it really reminded me of what he did to his wife, is what this report is actually saying. They wanted to do the population, and quite possibly have done and are doing. You know, it didn't end, but it's it always seemed like a metaphor for me. And Lynch always seemed to hint at these larger, more conspiratorial themes, and I won't say religious, because I don't think he was a religious person. He was spiritual. You know, I don't really agree with a lot of that transcendental meditation stuff. But he understood, as far as I can tell, there was obviously something bigger than us at play, and there's a spiritual realm, and that there was evil, there was good and evil, and that a lot of that stuff in this world just boils down to the good and the evil. And that was a theme amongst most of his work. You know, I know it's a little abstract and surreal for some, but to me it was a perfect representation of how absurd this world feels, very much like reading Kafka, which is why you see Kafka referenced in quite a bit of Lynch's work, especially in season 3, The Return, with Lynch's... Is it Lynch? There's something with Lynch and Kafka in it, and I forget what it was. But there's also another image of the atom bomb in Lynch's character's office. But it's awesome. Back to this. Project Artichoke emerged during the early Cold War, a period marked by intense anxiety over communist powers and reports of brainwashing techniques used on American prisoners of war in Korea. Internal CIA memos suggested that U.S. intelligence feared enemy nations had developed ways to control thought and behavior, prompting the agency to explore its own capabilities. We should really start testing on our own people. Look at all these people here in America. We could just use them as rats. This is one giant laboratory. Let's dose them with drugs and see what we can do to them. Who cares what happens? We are the CIA. This is for national security, man. The declassified document reveals the depth of this research, noting the need for a study to determine what drugs are best suited. We read that. The researchers involved in the secret program emphasized that long-term compounds should be capable of producing an agitating effect, which is the anxiety and lethargic and nervousness and hopelessness. Seems like we're in it, right? It seems like they found a way to turn the algorithm into a drug, which is why I like to call it digital fentanyl. And now we're all hooked up on it. We're all hopped up on the digital fentanyl. That's why we have to be careful with the stuff we are ingesting digitally and physically, clearly, because everything is poison. Now that they've officially added glyphosates to the food pyramid, I know you'll say, some people have said it's always been a part of the food pyramid, and it has, because they've been using it for a very long time. But now it's official. And it's really, 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 really bad for you. But so is a lot of things, you know, like look how salmon's changed over the years. Even though you want to buy wild fish when you can, but even when it comes to wild salmon, that stuff has been corrupted by bioengineering. You know, it's like they're like chimeras. They've taken, I call them insects. They're not technically insects, but they're like sea slugs, these gross fat slugs that they've bioengineered into salmon to make bigger. And the FDA approved this, and then they've been farming these mutant salmon for, I think since the 90s now, but they keep breaking out and entering the wild population, and there's no way of telling how many salmon in the wild have procreated with the mutant salmon. So I really cut back on salmon. I like salmon, but I really don't eat it as much. You can tell in the market how they use more dye in the salmon now. The colors are weird. Sucks. And it's not just that. It's like Fukushima had a huge impact on all, fish, but especially salmon. Stinks. Moreover, the report recommended consulting with the Army Chemical Warfare Service. Okay, we read that. So just wanted you guys to keep that in mind. as we've been talking so much about mind control. I believe a lot of the Epstein files are part of whatever new mind control program they're doing, because you can see the symptoms they've listed that they wanted to employ with drugs are being created in people now while they're reading the files. Hopelessness, despair. I mean, it shouldn't be all. We should be happy. I mean, not with the Epstein files, but we should be happy knowing what we know. We should be happy and positive because we have some of us have children, you know. So I like to, despite the darkness of the world, live as much of an optimistic life as I can with my faith, to show that to my children so that they can grow up and they're going to inherit a dark and sad and depraved world. But we got to remind ourselves that it's beautiful. So that's what I mean of like trying to balance happiness while also going through these files and learning, like, okay, this might be confirmation bias. It might be fake. What's real, what's not. Seems to be a lot of real stuff. And I'll just do a quick side quest real quick to show you, like, you know, I've been trying to show real life things that have happened because of the files being released. I think it's a very good thing. The New York Times wrote an op-ed about, someone wrote an op-ed for the New York Times saying we shouldn't have released the files. There's other big accounts or Substackers writing articles on, like, they're sick of the Epstein files. I think this is a huge revelation. We need to continue to talk about them. New stuff coming out every day. And people are like, well, nothing's happening. Well, nothing's happening really in America. They haven't done anything really. But around the world, there have been arrests. They seem to be surface level. The Prince is already released. Doesn't mean anything. Is it all a show? Who knows? Things are happening. Is it enough? No. Are we getting any accountability? Not yet. But just to show that there is some veracity to the darkness in these files, ex-Norway Prime Minister Jagland has been hospitalized after a suicide attempt amid an Epstein probe that has just been opened up against him because of his mention in the files. So, like, what is going on? You know, if he were innocent, you just say he's innocent, you know? But no. People are resigning, trying to kill themselves, getting arrested. Does it stick? Will it stick? Who knows? But all right, I was going to do a few more MK Ultra things, but I wanted to do a few other stories I found really interesting. But just to wrap that up, and I'm sure a lot of you guys know about this stuff already, but you know, Frank Olson, the first official MK Ultra death, was he pushed out of a window? His family thinks so, but remember, he was dosed unknowingly with acid by Sidney Gottlieb, who we've talked about quite a bit. The guy who was a chemical, it might have been the guy actually redacted in that file, the chemist who really was the brainchild for MK Ultra. And, you know, Jolly West, I was going to talk about that a bit, but we've gone over it. I want to move on to some weird stuff. This is a really weird story I want to get to. But Jolly West being involved with Jack Ruby after he shot Lee Harvey Oswald. Jack Ruby's psychosis was diagnosed by the same CIA doctor who had once killed an elephant with psychedelics. That's true. That's Jolly West. They say that when Jolly went into the room to observe Jack Ruby after he killed Lee Harvey Oswald, that after that meeting, Jack Ruby was never the same, which is, you know, and Jolly West was very deeply tied to MK Ultra. Definitely interested in how we could brainwash people. So I always think of Jolly West as like the Scarecrow from Batman. Poof, you know, spray the chemical in their face, put on a scary mask. Maybe they didn't have to put on a scary mask. And just return this person's brain to a clean slate. Tabula rasa. And I had another MK Ultra thing pulled up here. You guys know about something I don't talk about enough when it comes to MK Ultra. I talk about the Unabomber. Talk about Jolly West, Sidney Gottlieb. But you guys know about Whitey Bulger, right? Bulger wrote to a juror who convicted him that he would be dosed with LSD, monitored by a physician, repeatedly asked leading questions like, would you ever kill anyone? One of the jurors who helped convict Boston crime boss James Whitey Bulger in 2013 has now said that she regrets the choice after learning that he was an unwitting participant in a secret CIA experiment involving LSD during the Cold War. So I won't get into the whole thing, but Bulger was MK Ultra'd. I had to read this story. And here's the headline from February 21st of this year from Popular Science. Man accidentally gains control of 7,000 robot vacuums. A software engineer's earnest effort to steer his new DJI robot vacuum with a video game controller inadvertently granted him a sneak peek into thousands of people's homes. Well, this is why I tell you to shoot your, what are they called? I don't even know what they're called. The little vacuum robots things that I don't trust. I just get a broom, just broom people, just sweep it up. While building his own remote control app, Sammy Asdufal reportedly used an AI coding assistant to help reverse engineer how the robot communicated with DJI's remote cloud servers. But he soon discovered that the same credentials that allowed him to see and control his own device also provided access to live camera feeds, microphone audio, maps, and status data from nearly 7,000 other vacuums across 24 countries. The back-end security bug effectively exposed an army of internet-connected robots that, in the wrong hands, could have turned into surveillance tools, all without their owners ever knowing. Luckily, Asdufal chose not to exploit that. Instead, he shared his findings with The Verge, which quickly contacted DJI to report the flaw. While DJI tells Popular Science the issue has been resolved, the dramatic episode underscores warnings from cybersecurity experts who have long warned that internet-connected robots and other smart home devices present attractive targets for hackers. This is why I don't get a Roomba. Shoot all Roombas. As more households adopt home robots, including newer, more interactive humanoid... I think I heard a fake bird. More interactive humanoid models, similar vulnerabilities could become harder to detect. AI-powered coding tools, which make it easier for people with less technical knowledge to exploit software flaws, potentially risk amplifying those worries even further. The robot in question is the DJI Romo, an autonomous home vacuum that first launched in China last year and is currently expanding to other countries. I'm sure the Chinese Communist Party doesn't hack into all these things and secretly record the owners of these robots so they can use it later on in their social credit score system. Definitely doesn't happen. And it won't happen here. It's not like they're developing that here. Not at all. Palantir would never do that. Like, that's a ridiculous conspiracy theory. We'll probably read about it in 5 years. It retails for around $2,000 and is roughly the size of a large Terrier or a small fridge when docked at its base station. Like other robot vacuums, it's equipped with a range of sensors that help it navigate its surroundings and detect obstacles. Users can schedule and control it via an app, but it is designed to spend most of its time cleaning and mopping autonomously and spy on you. In order for the Romo, or really any modern autonomous vacuum, to function, it needs to constantly collect visual data from the building it is operating in. See, it's sending back the information, the mapping of everything, the sounds to some base that must use this, collect this, and at some point use it against you. It also needs to understand specific details about what makes, say, a kitchen different from a bedroom, so it can distinguish between the two. Some of that sensor data is stored remotely on DJI's servers rather than on the device itself. For Asdufal's DIY controller idea to work, he would need a way for his app to communicate with DJI servers and extract a security token that proves he is the owner of the robot. Rather than just verifying a single token, the servers granted access for a small army of robots, essentially treating him as their respective owner. The slip-up meant Asdufal as Dufall, could tap into their real-time camera feeds and activate their microphones. He also claims he could compile 2D floor plans of the homes the robots were operating in. A quick look at the robots' IP addresses also revealed their approximate locations. None of this, he insists, amounts to hacking on his part. He simply stumbled upon a major security issue. So just wanted to throw that out there for you guys. And I also saw this in terms of technology going too far. Zyphra releases Zuna, BCI foundation model advancing towards thought-to-text. This is from last week. A new brain-computer interface AI model improves real-world EEG data while advancing Zyphra's mission to develop human-aligned superintelligence. Of course, this is coming out of San Francisco. Zyphra today announced the release of Zuna, the company's first foundation model trained on brain data. Zuna significantly improves the quality and usability of electroencephalography, I hope I said that right, data, while establishing an early technical foundation for thought-to-text. We don't need this. I mean, you could see how the paraplegic might see this as something that could be compelling, as we get further into the world of Neuralink and other brain-computer interfacing technologies. There are people who could definitely benefit from these types of things. But I'm always saying there's an ethical line that the people creating this stuff obviously don't care about. And at some point, this will be used for bad purposes. So what might always sound like good intentions in the beginning, it won't always stay that way. Almost never does. Zuna is a 380M parameter diffusion auto encoder model that delivers immediate value for EEG practitioners. While scalp EEG data is widely available and non-invasive, it's often messy and incomplete. Zuna reconstructs high-fidelity brain signals from imperfect data, improving diagnostics, research workflows, and BCI applications. It also predicts missing channels from sparse inputs and electrode coordinates, scaling seamlessly from consumer headsets to 256 electrode research systems. So I'm just looking through to see if anything else. That's just like a release about it. There was something else here I forgot to have the link for. Let me see if I can pull it up. If Meta's made any advancements. I mean, because Meta has been working on trying to decode brain waves and dreams and turning them into pictures. No new articles, but let's see what this one is. This is from a year ago, almost exactly. Meta unveils AI models that convert brain activity into text with unmatched accuracy. So same thing, this is the next race. That is one of the final frontiers. This is not the final frontier because it's going to be death, right? You could say that the mind, dreams, consciousness for sure, but with the transhumanists, which is all what Silicon Valley is, their final actual frontier is death and conquering that. And that is a transhumanist goal. To create their manufactured heaven and to never die. And then to be able to control everything with their minds. So there's like a few different final frontiers for them. And this is it. And they are really working towards these advancements. So working with international researchers, Meta has announced major milestones in understanding human intelligence through 2 groundbreaking studies. They have created AI models that can read and interpret brain signals to reconstruct typed sentences and map the precise neural processes that transform thoughts into spoken or written words. They're going to say this is great for people who can't talk, who are paralyzed, can't use their hands. But can you imagine the depravity that our government will do? Thinking about MK Ultra, what we just discussed, thinking about what the documents themselves said, what they'd like to do to the population. And now as in the government, has super funded this world, and Trump has done it worse than the others, they are going to create absolutely depraved technology to control you. So, and this is what Epstein had been talking about in his files as well, in the emails. We talked about in the files voice to skull technology. So imagine if not only can they poison you and drug you, now they could read your mind. That's what they can't wait to read your mind, which the algorithms are already kind of doing, but that's based on your activity. They want to be in here, in your brain. And they could, I mean, for some of these companies, are just so as we can advertise to them. You thought it, now you can buy it. Here you go. But also, it will obviously be about mind control. So much of everything we talk about, so much of everything that goes on in this world is about mind control. So much of the most satanic things, whether it's like the 764 cult, Epstein, the government, MK Ultra, Michael Aquino, there is an aspect of being able to control you. That's why they also groom kids, not just because they want to torture and rape them and perhaps eat them, but also to turn them into their soldiers, which is what MK Ultra really was about in the beginning. Other than truth serums, it is about how we can make a super soldier. So you can imagine then, in this world where Meta, which is completely government contracted and out of DARPA for sure, and also Teal connected, big time. He gave a lot of money to them in the beginning. Imagine what they can develop now with AI that can read your brainwaves. Maybe someone could drive by, maybe a satellite can hit you real quick and read the brain activity. And then they could have a voice to skull technology, blast something into your ears, try to make you think it was actually God talking to you, or just keep hitting you with voices after voice after voice. I mean, I do believe people are sick and can hear voices. I think that is a thing. But also, how much of that is created? How much of that has been made in a lab, has been manufactured? How many of these people that happen to be former like army, some military type person who become mass shooters, then we hear they were on our radar. The FBI says they were on our radar. Oh, they heard voices. What was going on there? The guy who killed Irina Zarutska, this story went kind of under the radar. We covered it. He said he heard voices and that there was an implant in him. He might just be crazy because that was such an insane act of violence. Horrible. You guys remember that happened we saw the video. I always have to feel like I have to say this because it just blows my mind. When that video of her dying on that train went viral, that was the day before Charlie was murdered. So 2 people bleeding out of their necks, one day after the next. It's just insane to think about. That's a trauma, right? Which then, if you will humor me and let me unlock my conspiratorial brain, which isn't too hard to do, were they purposefully inflicting a trauma on all of us? Was that calculated? Was that organic and then made to be something used against us in the algorithm? We'll obviously never know. Or maybe something will come out. Who knows? It felt like they were trying to inflict mass trauma on us. And why I say that now, post Epstein files, is because that is what they literally talk about doing to the population. Just like these MK Ultra files. Same thing. It's mind control. They need to control us. They need slavery. This is a country of slaves. They didn't fight the Civil War to free the slaves. They fought the Civil War to make everyone a slave. That's what's happened. We are all debt slaves. Maybe not you. And I hope, you're not. I am. And it's terrible. It's brutal. But it's all about mind control and trauma. And Epstein himself discussing in his emails, we can unlock psychic abilities by traumatizing people. The traumatized actually might be more susceptible to having psychic powers. How can we control the population by traumatizing them? The emails between him and the guy from Barclays. War will traumatize and confuse and distract the population. This is what they think about. This is what the government thinks about us. This is what we read it in the files. This is what they literally say. So let's just end up here. Speaking of the confluence of AI and our wonderful government. Hegseth to meet Anthropic CEO as Pentagon threatens banishment. This is from yesterday. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth has summoned Anthropic CEO Dario Amodei to the Pentagon on Tuesday morning for what sources say is likely to be a tense meeting over terms for military use of Anthropic's Claude. So that's this morning. Anthropic knows this is not a get-to-know-you meeting, a senior defense official told Axios. This is not a friendly meeting. This is a SHIT or get-off-the-pot meeting. Remember, we just talked about everyone stepping down from Anthropic like 2 weeks ago for safety concerns. Claude is the only AI model available in the military's classified systems and the most capable model for sensitive defense and intelligence work. The Pentagon doesn't want to lose access to Claude, but is furious with Anthropic for refusing to lift its safeguards entirely. If this is true, again, if this is true, we don't know. It's a source, according to a source. They're familiar with the source's thinking. An Anthropic spokesperson said, we are having productive conversations in good faith. Defense officials say negotiations have shown no progress and are on the verge of breaking down. Anthropic is willing to loosen its usage restrictions but wants to wall off two areas: the mass surveillance of Americans and the development of weapons that fire without human involvement. If this is true, that is crazy. The company is committed to using frontier AI in support of U.S. national security, the spokesperson said. The Pentagon says it's unduly restrictive to have to clear individual uses with the company and has demanded that all AI labs make their models available for all lawful uses. The Pentagon has threatened to declare Anthropic a supply chain risk, not only voiding its contracts, but forcing other companies that work with the Pentagon to certify they aren't using Claude in those workflows. The Pentagon is discussing other potential tools to force Anthropic's hand. A defense official said Hegseth would effectively be presenting Amodei with an ultimatum. It would be a massive task to offboard Anthropic, which is deeply entrenched, and replace it with another AI lab that currently has inferior capabilities. So, I mean, is this all just to get more grok? Let's see if there's any news on this before we call it a day. Because they would have met this morning. Let's see. I'm trying to get the newest one here. From 30 minutes ago, CNN. Pete Hegseth meets with Anthropic CEO over disagreements about AI safeguards. Anthropic CEO, okay, let's just see here. An issue is the guardrails Anthropic placed on its AI models. The Pentagon, which has a $200 million contract with Anthropic, wants the company to lift the restrictions. The negotiations have been ongoing for a couple months. Last week, we saw this. Okay, so the meeting's taking place as at the time of this reading. So there's no updates yet, but this is 30 minutes ago. The meeting is taking place right now. So we'll see. We'll have some updates tomorrow. And what do you think? Will Anthropic cave, or will Elon swoop in and get just more money from the government because they are all defense contractors in some shape or form? Bezos, Zuckerberg, Gates, Thiel, Altman, Ellison. It's the whole circus. All the tech vampires. Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for tuning in. This has been another episode of Inverted World. I'm your host, Shane Cashman. And I appreciate you tuning in. Thank you for leaving a comment. Thank you for liking. Thank you for sharing. Really appreciate it, you guys. And I'll be back tomorrow. Have a great night. See ya.